What if I told you that the greatest mass migration of an entire people occurred because of a single piece of paper? Are you ready to learn the truth about how thousands of people lost their homes without a single shot being fired? For many years, official history has tried to gloss over the details of this monumental and unjust tragedy. For a long time, it was believed that indigenous peoples moved westward voluntarily in search of a better life. People were led to believe in a peaceful and mutually beneficial exchange of settled territories for new unoccupied lands. But behind the beautiful and diplomatic words of the politicians of that time lay a very cruel bureaucratic calculation. The reality concealed a carefully thought out and incredibly large-scale plan to clear vast territories for new settlers. The arriving colonists urgently needed fertile land to grow cotton and extract valuable minerals. For the sake of this quick economic gain, the government signed that very fateful resettlement law. The inner strength of the people proved far stronger than any cruel government decree or armed military convoy. They carried their language and their beliefs through long months of deprivation and endless pain. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how the indigenous people managed to preserve their culture after losing their homeland. Guess how long it took to create a unique writing system from scratch? For many years, the indigenous people of the Eastern Woods sought a reliable way to preserve their knowledge for future generations. One of the most prominent figures of the Cherokee people spent 12 years developing a syllabic alphabet. This man carefully studied the symbols and sounds of his language to create a precise system. The result was a logical and incredibly accurate writing system. The emergence of their own writing system was a true breakthrough for the entire tribe. In just a few years, most people learned to read and write in their native language. This allowed them to exchange messages over vast distances and record important decisions. Soon, the tribe began publishing its own newspaper, which was printed in 2 languages. The pages of this publication spread throughout all the settlements, uniting people through shared information. The cultural transformation was not limited to the creation of an alphabet and the publication of newspapers. Indigenous peoples actively adopted new methods of agriculture and construction. They built spacious houses, planted orchards, and sowed wheat fields. Blacksmith shops, mills, and craft workshops appeared in the settlements. Their level of development was on par with that of neighboring settler communities. The tribe went even further and created its own constitution based on democratic principles. They formed a bicameral council that passed laws and regulated internal affairs. A judicial system was established to resolve disputes and maintain order within the territory. The nation's capital became a thriving administrative center with official buildings. All these steps demonstrated their readiness to live by the new rules of a changing world. They hoped that such adaptation would protect their lands from outside encroachment. However, these impressive achievements did not bring the expected security and recognition. The lands where their thriving farms were located attracted increasing attention from settlers. The government began to pressure the tribal leaders to hand over their territories. Politicians ignored the fact that the indigenous people had built a developed and peaceful society. The desire to acquire fertile soil proved stronger than any legal or moral obligations. The situation became significantly more complicated after gold veins were discovered on the tribe's lands. Thousands of treasure hunters flocked to these territories in the hope of getting rich quickly. They occupied plots of land, destroyed buildings, and drove the rightful owners from their fields. Local authorities refused to protect the rights of the indigenous people and encouraged the actions of the invaders. Laws were passed prohibiting Native Americans from mining gold on their own land. This marked the beginning of a large-scale campaign to drive the people from their historic homeland. The nation's leaders tried to fight for their rights using exclusively legal means. They hired the best lawyers and filed lawsuits in the country's highest courts. In one of the key cases, the Supreme Court even ruled in favor of the indigenous people. The justices recognized their right to sovereignty and independence from the laws of a particular state. This victory in court gave the people a brief hope for a just resolution to the conflict. Unfortunately, the joy of the legal victory proved to be premature and short-lived. The head of state publicly refused to comply with the Supreme Court's ruling. The politician openly stated that the judges could try to enforce their decision themselves. This unprecedented move demonstrated complete disregard for the tribe's laws and rights. It became clear that no court could protect their lands from confiscation. A heavy sense of foreboding hung in the air regarding inevitable and radical changes. People understood that their peaceful life in the homeland of their ancestors was coming to an end. Despite all efforts at integration, they were perceived as an obstacle to the country's expansion. The government was already preparing plans for the mass resettlement of all Eastern tribes. This process required enormous organizational effort and colossal resources. Ahead of them lay a trial for which it was impossible to prepare in advance. The history of this people's adaptation demonstrates incredible resilience and a drive to build. They proved their ability to change and develop under the most challenging historical conditions. Their achievements in education and governance command sincere respect from historians. I'd love to hear your perspective on these events. Please share your thoughts in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our new historical investigations. What if everything you were taught about fair treaties is outdated? Official documents often conceal a complex web of manipulation and hidden motives. The history of the relocation is inextricably linked to one specific agreement signed in a small village. This document required the tribe to completely relinquish all its eastern territories. In exchange, the government promised to provide new lands far to the west in financial compensation. The main problem was who exactly had signed this document. The agreement was signed by only a small group of people who had no official authority to do so. The nation's legitimate government and the overwhelming majority of the population categorically rejected this treaty. They considered it illegal and refused to recognize its legal validity. People believed that such an important decision could not be made without the consent of the entire nation. Tribal leaders immediately organized a large-scale protest campaign against the bogus agreement. They collected thousands of signatures on a petition demanding that the unjust document be annulled. This extensive petition was sent directly to the capital for consideration by politicians. The people's representatives hoped to appeal to the common sense of government officials. They presented compelling arguments in favor of preserving their ancestral lands. Despite all the protests and logical arguments, the government ratified the treaty. The document acquired the status of an official law, binding on all parties. The tribe was given a strict 2-year deadline to voluntarily pack their belongings and relocate. This period became a time of immense internal tension and uncertainty for every resident. Many refused to believe the reality of the unfolding events until the very end. The political maneuvering surrounding the treaty was accompanied by an active information campaign. The authorities distributed leaflets urging people to accept the inevitable and begin packing. Those who agreed to leave voluntarily were provided with a small amount of supplies. However, the overwhelming majority chose to remain in their homes as a sign of peaceful protest. They continued to cultivate the fields and hope for a miracle right up until the deadline expired. When the allotted time came to an end, the situation became critical. The authorities began to enforce the terms of the signed agreement. Regular troops entered the tribe's territory to organize the eviction process. An inventory was taken of the property that people could not take with them on the long journey. Spacious farms and cozy homes passed into the hands of complete strangers. Preparing for the journey required precise coordination by the military. Temporary transit camps were set up to gather and register the displaced people. People were forced to leave their homes, taking only the bare essentials with them. The wooden fences of the camps became a temporary refuge for thousands of displaced families. The atmosphere in these places was filled with anxiety over the looming uncertainty. Military engineers were actively planning the routes for the upcoming large-scale movement. They studied maps of rivers, dirt roads, and mountain passes to chart the optimal path. The necessary amount of food was calculated to supply the vast mass of people. Massive wooden wagons and materials for repairing wheels along the way were purchased. This entire bureaucratic machine operated with cold and relentless precision. The long days of waiting at transit points took a heavy toll on people's morale. They watched as their native lands vanished forever over the horizon. Past achievements, erected buildings, and blooming gardens remained in the past. Ahead lay a long journey to completely unfamiliar Western lands. One of the most difficult periods in the history of the continent's indigenous population was beginning. The preparations for the resettlement became a stark example of the callous state apparatus. Political interests completely overshadowed the fates of thousands of civilians. The written contract became an instrument of widespread disruption to people's familiar way of life. People prepared to step into the unknown, relying solely on their inner strength. What do you think people took with them when they left their homes forever? I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the indigenous elders. Just before leaving their ancestral lands, the people performed one of the most important rituals of their lives. They gathered embers from their main ceremonial fires, which had been burning for centuries. These smoldering embers were carefully placed into special clay vessels. In this way, the tribe planned to carry a piece of their homeland to new territories. Fire held immense cultural and spiritual significance for the inhabitants of the eastern forests. It was a symbol of unity, the wisdom of ancestors, and the continuity of the life cycle. The most important laws were enacted and lengthy negotiations were held around the central fire. The responsibility for keeping the flame alive was entrusted to the most responsible and respected members of the community. To lose this fire meant losing the connection to their rich history. Clay pots filled with hot coals became the most valuable cargo in the wagons. The firekeepers watched around the clock to ensure that the embers did not go out while traveling. They carefully added small dry twigs and bark, keeping the fire smoldering. The pots were protected from torrential rains, strong winds, and the biting cold. This process required incredible concentration and immense dedication every single day. Even in the most difficult moments of the journey, the fire continued to warm the travelers' souls. In the evenings at campsites, people gathered around small bonfires kindled from the sacred embers. The flames reminded them of their abandoned homes and gave them hope for a future rebirth. They served as an invisible thread connecting the past to the unknown present. The keepers of the flame passed the vessels from hand to hand during difficult crossings. The road was full of unforeseen obstacles that threatened the fire's survival. Heavy downpours turned the ground into a solid mud, making it difficult to find dry firewood. Gusty winds threatened to extinguish the fragile flame in open areas. Nevertheless, the people displayed incredible ingenuity to save the sacred object. They created shelters from thick fabric and hid the pots in the most protected parts of the wagons. The very act of carrying the fire demonstrated the people's refusal to surrender to their circumstances. They refused to leave their culture to be torn apart by the new landowners. The fire became the physical embodiment of their independent spirit and will to resist. Every spark preserved was a small victory over injustice and coercion. This flame lit their way through the darkest and most hopeless nights. The keepers of the fire carried out their work in the strictest secrecy from the accompanying soldiers. The soldiers did not understand the true value of the old clay pots in the Native American wagons. To them, it was just another element of a foreign way of life they could not comprehend. Thanks to this secrecy, the ritual was successfully carried through the entire long and grueling journey. The secret flame continued to burn in defiance of all prohibitions and restrictions. When the caravans finally reached their destination, a great event took place. A new central bonfire was solemnly lit at the new location. The very same embers carried halfway across the continent were used for this. The flame flared up with renewed vigor, symbolizing the beginning of a new chapter in the people's history. The people looked at the fire and realized that their spirit remained unconquered. The tradition of keeping this fire alive continues to this day. In modern indigenous settlements, bonfires lit from that very flame still burn. They serve as a constant reminder of the Great Migration and the incredible resilience of their ancestors. This symbol continues to unite people and inspire new generations to preserve traditions. Culture proved to be far stronger than the initiators of the resettlement had anticipated. The tradition of keeping the fire alive has become a symbol of the spiritual strength of an entire people. It proved that culture cannot be destroyed simply by moving people from one place to another. This ritual helped preserve their inner core amid total uncertainty. The flame from the old forest continued to shine on a completely new land. If you're interested in this amazing fact about preserving the fire, be sure to like this video. What was found in the old archives is staggering in its scale. Moving tens of thousands of people required incredible organizational effort and a vast amount of resources. Special overland routes were laid out, and waterways were designated for transport. Long lines of heavy wooden wagons stretched along the dirt roads of the eastern states. The wheels of these massive wagons left deep ruts in the rain-soaked earth. The organizers had to deploy a massive fleet of vehicles. In addition to traditional wheeled wagons, river vessels of various designs were actively used. Wide flatboats were used to transport people and cargo downstream. Steamboats towed entire caravans of barges loaded with supplies and tools. This entire fleet moved through the continent's complex network of waterways. Land routes presented no less of a logistical challenge. The roads of that time were often nothing more than wide clearings in the forest. Wagons regularly broke down on rocky stretches, requiring immediate repairs in the field. The caravans carried spare axles, wheels, and carpentry tools. Craftsmen worked tirelessly to keep the continuous column moving. Providing travelers with sufficient food became a major problem. Barrels of grain and corn were stockpiled in advance at special warehouses along the route. People carried dried vegetables and other long-lasting food items with them. Finding clean drinking water became a daily task for the detachment's scouts. They explored every stream and spring within a few miles of the campsite. Moving the massive convoy required strict discipline and a precise schedule. In the morning, a signal sounded to assemble, and people quickly broke camp. The wagons lined up in a long chain stretching for many kilometers. In the evening, the process was repeated in reverse, setting up the wagons, lighting fires, and preparing food. This monotonous rhythm became the foundation of life for thousands of people for many months. Crossing the numerous water obstacles was a particularly difficult task. Bridges over large rivers were extremely rare in those days. Massive wooden ferries were used to cross the water obstacles. Loading and unloading the wagons took an enormous amount of time and effort. Huge lines formed near the crossings, delaying the progress of the entire convoy. Water routes, though they seemed faster, harbored many dangers. Wheeled steamboats often ran aground due to low water levels in the rivers. Submerged snags could pierce the bottom of a wooden flatboat at any moment. Travelers had to constantly maneuver around dangerous sections of the riverbed. Navigation required great skill and impeccable knowledge of local conditions. Communication between different groups of settlers was maintained by messengers. They traveled back and forth between the caravans, relaying information about road conditions and the availability of supplies. Group leaders regularly held meetings to adjust the route based on circumstances. Maps were constantly updated based on data from advanced scouting parties. This system of information exchange helped avoid the most dangerous sections of the journey. Despite all the planning, logistics often broke down completely. Rain washed out the roads, making it impossible to deliver food from remote warehouses. Wagons got stuck in deep mud, and people had to pull them out with their own hands. Organizers had to make difficult decisions on the fly. Flexibility and the ability to improvise became essential for completing this journey. Huge caravans moved forward extremely slowly due to the difficult terrain. People were forced to adapt to constant movement and the lack of familiar comforts. Every day brought new organizational challenges that required immediate solutions. The journey west gradually turned into a grueling test of human endurance. Want to know how the settlers coped with the harsh natural conditions along the way? The migration route passed through a variety of climatic and geographical zones. At the very beginning of their journey, the settlers had to traverse mountainous terrain covered in dense forests. Narrow trails wound their way through tall trees and steep, rocky slopes. Wooden wagons often got stuck on the uneven, rocky sections of the mountain road. People had to exert tremendous effort to move the caravans through these natural barriers. The Appalachian Mountains became the first serious test of endurance for everyone on the journey. Dense vegetation obstructed visibility and made it difficult to find the best route. Steep elevation changes significantly slowed the progress of the heavy wagons. In the fall, these forests were shrouded in thick fog, reducing visibility to a minimum. Crossing this region required tremendous concentration. After descending from the mountains, the caravans entered a zone of vast, rolling plains. Here the roads widened, but a new problem arose in the form of marshy ground. Frequent rains turned the lowlands into impassable lakes of mud and slush. The wheels of the wagons sank into the soft ground up to their axles, bringing the journey to a complete halt. People had to chop branches and lay them under the wheels to create a firm footing. A significant portion of the journey followed a route along major river valleys. The riverbanks were often marshy and overgrown with dense, impassable thickets. The roads here wound their way around numerous tributaries and small lakes. The damp climate of these places created a constant feeling of discomfort and dampness. Clothing and supplies quickly became damp, requiring constant drying during stops. Gradually, the landscape began to change, revealing views of endless expanses. The forest grew sparser, giving way to tall grasses and windswept plains. This open terrain offered no shelter from the scorching sun or sudden downpours. Gathering firewood for campfires began to take much longer. Nature became increasingly harsh and demanding on the travelers. The greatest geographical obstacle was the mighty Mississippi River. Its powerful waters, several miles wide, blocked the path of thousands of people. Strong currents and whirlpools made crossing an extremely dangerous undertaking. Huge clusters of wagons formed on the riverbanks, waiting for ferries. This wait stretched on for weeks, wearing travelers down with uncertainty. Crossing the water barrier required the utmost caution and coordinated action. Ferries slowly shuttled back and forth between the banks, transporting wagons in small batches. Strong winds often swept the vessels downstream, forcing them to take a long detour. People looked anxiously at the dark waters separating them from the rest of their journey. This stage became a true test of endurance and patience. The west bank of the river greeted the settlers with entirely new geographical conditions. The soil here was drier and firmer, which made it slightly easier to move the wagons. However, new problems arose in the form of deep ravines and steep banks of small rivers. Lowering and raising the wagons into such ravines required the use of special systems of ropes and pulleys. Every kilometer of the journey had to be literally fought for against the harsh natural environment. The geography of the route constantly presented new surprises and demanded adaptation. From the dense forests of the east to the wide valleys of the west, the landscape changed beyond recognition. The settlers had to draw on all their experience of surviving in various natural conditions. They learned to read the signs of nature, find hidden water sources, and predict changes in the weather. Knowledge of the environment became the main tool on this arduous journey. Crossing the Great River was one of the most difficult stages of the entire epic journey. People spent days and weeks ferrying all the wagons to the opposite bank. This process required coordinated effort and extreme caution on the water. Once on the western bank, they left behind the familiar landscapes of the eastern forests. Ahead lay entirely different landscapes, harboring new and unknown trials. Are you ready for the shocking truth about the natural conditions of that time? The winter of 1838 turned out to be one of the coldest in recorded history. Huge masses of snow fell on the roads, blocking the progress of heavy wagons. A sharp drop in temperature turned the soggy autumn mud into solid, impassable ice. Ordinary camping gear could not provide enough warmth in such extreme conditions. The frozen ground made setting up temporary camps for the night extremely difficult. Driving wooden tent pegs into the ground became practically impossible. People were forced to seek natural shelter among the rocks or under dense trees. Searching for dry firewood under a thick layer of snow took an incredible amount of time. They had to keep the fires burning around the clock to avoid freezing during the cold nights. The cold wind cut right through them, making every step a real ordeal. The settlers wrapped themselves in blankets and furs, trying to preserve what little warmth they had left. They moved in tight groups to shield each other from the icy gusts. The wooden wheels of the wagons slid across the ice, constantly veering off the beaten track. They had to pull the heavy wagons out of snowdrifts practically every day. Rivers that had previously served as transportation routes had now turned into insurmountable obstacles. The water was covered with a thick layer of ice, completely halting the movement of boats and ferries. Huge chunks of ice piled up along the banks, blocking the cart's descent to the water. Travelers had to wait for weeks until the ice became strong enough to cross on foot. This wait in the open, freezing air took a heavy toll on people. It was especially difficult during severe and prolonged blizzards. Visibility dropped to zero, forcing the caravans to stop for several days. People were forced to sit in cold wagons, listening to the howling wind outside. On such days, the consumption of firewood and food increased several-fold. The leaders of the groups anxiously counted their remaining supplies, waiting for the bad weather to end. Despite the harsh conditions, people showed incredible ingenuity to stay warm. They heated stones in the fire and placed them inside the wagons for warmth. They wrapped their shoes in extra layers of thick fabric to protect them from deep snow. They tried to prepare food in large portions so it would stay warm longer. Mutual aid and support became the key factors in overcoming the winter trials. Every morning began with the hard work of clearing snow around the camp. Tools became covered with a layer of ice, making them slippery and difficult to use. People worked with shovels and homemade scrapers to clear a path for the trucks. This physical labor helped warm them up a little before the start of the long daily trek. The frozen world around them seemed utterly lifeless and hostile. When the snow began to melt, the situation did not improve significantly. The roads turned into continuous streams of icy water and liquid mud. Walking on such a surface was even more difficult than on solid snow. Clothes were constantly getting wet, and drying them by the fire was extremely difficult. The travelers had to fight for every meter of progress. The winter period became the most grueling stage of the entire large-scale migration. Nature challenged human endurance, testing the resilience of every participant in the expedition. This experience toughened the people, teaching them to survive in the most extreme conditions. They realized that joint efforts and mutual aid could overcome any climatic obstacles. The winter trials became an important part of their shared historical memory. Blizzards and snowstorms significantly increased the total time spent on the journey. The caravans advanced only short distances, expending a colossal amount of energy. Nature seemed to be testing the will and determination of every participant in this massive migration. Despite the icy wind and snow barriers, people continued to move stubbornly westward. I wonder what awaited these incredibly resilient people at the very end of their long journey. After many months of an exhausting journey, the first caravans reached the final destination of their route. The Native American territory greeted the arrivals with completely unfamiliar and harsh landscapes. Instead of the dense, humid forests of the east, vast, dry prairies stretched out before them. The reddish, rocky soil was very different from the familiar fertile lands of their homeland. The climate here was much drier, with strong winds and infrequent rainfall. The new terrain required entirely different approaches to construction and agriculture. There were very few trees here for building traditional spacious homes. People had to use stone, clay, and sparse shrubs to build their first dwellings. Water sources lay deep underground, requiring the digging of new wells. The process of adapting to this unfamiliar environment began from the very first day. Natural conditions dictated their own strict rules for every aspect of life. The summer months brought unbearable heat and prolonged droughts. Traditional crops brought from the east struggled to take root in the new dry soil. Farmers had to experiment with new plant varieties and methods of irrigating the fields. They carefully studied the peculiarities of the local climate to ensure a harvest. The flora of the new territory was completely unfamiliar to the new settlers. Instead of the familiar chestnut and oak trees, low-growing shrubs and prickly cacti grew here. The grasses of the plains were tough and tall, forming a thick carpet stretching to the horizon. People learned to identify useful properties in the new plants for everyday use. This process of understanding the environment was vital for successful settlement. Marking out new plots of land became one of the first organizational tasks. The nation's leaders distributed the land among families to begin agricultural work. New boundaries were established, and dirt roads were laid between the future settlements. People tried to settle closer to scarce water sources and small groves. Each family began the process of settling their new plot from scratch. The vast open spaces offered a sense of freedom, but at the same time, their emptiness was intimidating. Far from familiar landmarks, it was easy to get lost among the identical hills. Traveling between the new settlements required a good knowledge of the terrain and strong navigation skills. People gradually grew accustomed to the endless sky and the constant whistling of the wind through the grass. This land was slowly but surely becoming their new permanent home. The lack of familiar building materials forced them to be incredibly resourceful. The first structures were often dugouts or houses made of tightly packed sod blocks. They retained heat well in the winter and provided protection from the scorching sun in the summer. Over time, as logistics improved, buildings made of imported lumber began to appear. The architectural appearance of the new settlements gradually took on more familiar forms. Despite all the difficulties, the new land offered the chance to start life with a clean slate. People were free from the pressure of Eastern colonists and could develop independently. They poured all their energy into settling these challenging but independent territories. Working in the fields and building houses brought the community even closer together. The difficulties of adaptation forged a new, even more resilient character in the people. Gradually, the settlers began to find advantages in this unfamiliar and harsh environment. They discovered fertile plots along the banks of local small rivers and streams. The spacious valleys proved quite suitable for large-scale agriculture. People began actively applying their knowledge to adapt to the new natural conditions. This region gradually became their new home, despite the initial difficulties. Settling into their new home began with the construction of temporary dwellings and the establishment of new settlements. The nation's leaders immediately set about rebuilding the shattered system of government. Soon, a new capital was founded and named Talakua. In the center of this city, a large wooden building was constructed to serve as the venue for national councils. People were eager to return their lives to their usual, organized routine as quickly as possible. Restoring the legislative and judicial framework became a crucial step toward stability. A new code of laws was adapted to the realities of the Western Territories. Courts began operating to resolve land disputes and maintain public order. Special ranger units were created to patrol the borders and ensure security. Society began to function according to strict democratic rules, just as it had in the East. Particular attention was paid to restoring the system of education and cultural enlightenment. New schools began opening in settlements to teach literacy and the sciences. The unique syllabic alphabet once again became the primary tool for transmitting knowledge. A new printing press was installed in the capital to resume publication of the national newspaper. The pages of the latest issues once again began to unite families scattered across the plains. Economic recovery proceeded in parallel with political and cultural processes. People actively developed agriculture, sowing the fields with adapted varieties of wheat and corn. New trading posts, smithies, and carpentry workshops began to appear. Trade ties were established with neighboring regions to exchange essential goods. The nation's economy gradually gained momentum, providing residents with everything they needed. The construction of permanent buildings became a symbol of the nation's definitive settlement in the new lands. Sturdy brick and wooden houses began to replace temporary dugouts. A majestic Supreme Court building was erected in the capital, underscoring the nation's independence. City streets widened and new public spaces and squares emerged. Infrastructure developed at an incredible pace, transforming the appearance of settlements. Mutual aid and collective labor played a vital role in rebuilding society. Neighbors joined forces to build houses together, harvest crops, and lay roads. This tradition of mutual aid helped them overcome the consequences of the difficult resettlement more quickly. Community work was carried out regularly, improving the quality of life for all members of the community. People understood that only together could they build a prosperous future. Harsh climatic conditions demanded constant innovation in daily life. Farmers designed new irrigation systems to retain moisture in the soil. Artisans created more durable tools capable of working with rocky soil. Every new invention made life in the Western Territories a little more comfortable. The intellectual potential of the people was directed toward the practical development of the environment. The process of recovery also affected the social structure of society under the new conditions. New business relationships were formed based on trade and the exchange of expertise. Community leaders actively communicated with one another, discussing plans for further development. New public organizations and councils emerged to regulate various aspects of life. Society became more complex and multifaceted, adapting to the new challenges of the times. All these impressive achievements were made possible by the incredible unity of the entire nation. People worked from dawn to dusk to secure a future for their families in the new land. They rebuilt their nation, making it even more organized and modern. Their new cities became centers of trade and culture throughout the Western Territory. This period of reconstruction stood as a shining example of the creative spirit's triumph over adversity. The mass arrival of Eastern tribes had a tremendous impact on the region's ecology and geography. Vast agricultural lands began to appear in place of the endless prairies. The new settlers actively used the sparse trees along the rivers to build spacious homes. These actions gradually altered the pristine appearance of the Western Territories. The nature of the Great Plains began to adapt to the presence of a vast number of new people. The emergence of large farms required changes to the natural course of some streams. Long irrigation canals were dug to supply water to corn and wheat fields. Land that had been covered for centuries only by wild grasses was now regularly plowed with heavy plows. These agricultural practices radically altered the structure of the topsoil. The landscape gradually took on the characteristics of an organized agricultural region. The arriving tribes also began to actively interact with the local indigenous inhabitants of the plains. The meeting of two completely different cultural traditions led to a large-scale exchange of knowledge. Farmers from the east shared their knowledge of growing various crops. In return, they learned skills for surviving in open spaces and finding hidden water sources. This interaction enriched both sides with new, useful knowledge. The establishment of clear boundaries for new landholdings also changed the region's geography. Long wooden and stone fences appeared, dividing the vast pastures and fields. A network of new dirt roads was laid out, connecting remote settlements. Over time, these roads became important trade routes for the entire West. The prairie landscape became more structured and easier for caravans to navigate. Infrastructure development required the extraction of various building materials in the new territory. Small stone quarries appeared to provide blocks for building foundations. Clay was extracted for the production of bricks and pottery in specialized workshops. The region's natural resources began to be actively utilized to meet the needs of the growing population. This process required a careful approach to the environment to maintain balance. The settlers' influence also extended to the floor of the Great Plains at that time. Along with the people, seeds of new plants and fruit trees arrived in the West. Small apple and peach orchards began to appear around the houses. These new plants successfully adapted to the local climate, altering the region's botanical composition. The green oases of the orchards became bright spots against the backdrop of the monotonous prairies. The expansion of settlements led to the creation of new hubs on the continent's map. Small camps quickly turned into major trading centers with thriving economies. Merchants from all corners of the West flocked here to exchange goods and news. The geographic center of activity shifted toward the new organized territories. This region began to play a vital role in shaping the future of the entire country. The changes affected not only the physical landscape, but also the cultural map of the area. New geographical names emerged, reflecting the history and traditions of the arriving peoples. Rivers, hills, and valleys were given names in the unique languages of the eastern tribes. These names became permanently established on official maps, preserving the memory of the migration. The landscape began to speak in new languages, reflecting the fusion of diverse cultures. Over time, strong trade and diplomatic ties were established between the various tribes. They exchanged goods, agricultural expertise, and cultural traditions on a regular basis. This process of integration contributed to the creation of a unique social environment on the western frontiers. The region became a true crossroads of diverse cultures and ways of life. Interaction among peoples became an important part of the history of the exploration of the vast continent. The experience of mass resettlement forever changed the self-awareness and worldview of the indigenous peoples. They lost their ancestral lands but managed to preserve what mattered most: their identity. The unique syllabic alphabet continued to be actively used in daily life and official documents. Traditional crafts, music, and oral traditions were carefully passed down from generation to generation. People made a conscious effort to protect their customs from disappearing under the new conditions. The establishment of a developed education system in the West played a key role in preserving their heritage. Schools taught not only the exact sciences, but also their native history and language. Teachers told younger generations about life in the eastern forests and the long journey. This helped maintain a connection across time and ensured that their deep historical roots were not forgotten. Education became the primary tool for protecting the culture from complete assimilation. Special attention was paid to preserving traditional methods of governance and social organization. National councils continued to convene to resolve important internal matters. Rituals associated with the sacred fire were held regularly, sustaining the spiritual unity of the community. The nation's leaders did everything possible to preserve political independence in the new territories. The traditions of the ancestors were successfully adapted to modern political realities. The publication of newspapers in the native language helped to document many aspects of the unique culture. The pages featured ancient legends, poems, and philosophical reflections by thinkers. These printed materials became an invaluable archive of knowledge for future historians and linguists. Literature evolved, reflecting the new experience of life on the boundless plains of the West. The written word became a powerful weapon in the struggle to preserve their national identity. Women played a huge role in maintaining traditional domestic life and crafts. They continued to create intricate patterns on fabrics and pottery using ancient techniques. The secrets of using medicinal herbs were carefully preserved and applied in daily life. It was within the family that the foundations of respect for culture and the native language were laid. The home remained the main stronghold, protecting traditions from outside influence. Decades after resettlement, the nation was able to build an incredibly strong and resilient economy. Their achievements in agriculture and education drew admiration from their neighbors. They proved that a people's true strength lies in their capacity for creation. The hardships they endured did not break their spirit, but only made it stronger and more resolute. This historical experience became a symbol of incredible resilience and survival. The memory of this long journey has been forever preserved in the folklore and art of the indigenous people. Artists captured scenes of the migration on their canvases, conveying the magnitude of this event. Musicians composed melodies reflecting the sadness of parting and the hope for a new beginning. Art helped reframe the tragic experience and find a source of inspiration within it. It served as a bridge between the past and the present for the entire community. Today, the descendants of those settlers continue to honor the memory of their ancestors' great migration. They organize large-scale commemorative events and are restoring the historical caravan routes. The nation not only managed to survive, but also became one of the most influential cultural forces. Their history serves as a reminder of the importance of preserving one's roots despite any obstacles. The spirit of this people proved far stronger than any political decisions or natural trials. What do you think of today's topic and the story of these people's resilience? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel to continue exploring history with us.